After you hear today's story, you will run with all your legs when you see this creature. Today I'm going to tell the story of one man who stumbled upon it. I suggest you listen to the end so you don't have the same thing happen to you. And here we go. My name is John, and for 7 years now something has been haunting me from a hunt I went on. I have loved hunting since I was a kid. I went hunting with my dad for the first time when I was 10 years old, and I have been hunting my whole life. For as long as I can remember, I've enjoyed outdoor sports, but about 7 years ago when I was 23 years old, I went hunting alone. I missed every shot because of where I was. Pretty rough terrain, so I went to a different spot, and that's when I noticed what appeared to be an altar. It was about 3 feet high, 8 feet long. I wondered what it was, and went to inspect it. There was blood on the altar. I was confused and a little worried about what I would find around it. I looked around and saw nothing and no one. I looked for signs of dead bodies buried nearby, and when I came back, the top of the altar had been lifted, and there was nothing there. I thought that was odd, but didn't pay attention to it. It was the kind of alarm bell worth paying attention to. It would catch up with me later anyway. I left, and as I headed back to my truck, I noticed something in the distance. It looked like a Gigan mantis, but that was impossible. It was black in color and the size of a bear, so I assumed it was a black bear. How wrong I was. I walked to my truck, got in it, started the engine and drove off. When I got home that night, I felt uneasy and like something was watching me. I didn't pay attention to it because all the doors and windows were locked. I even made sure I checked everything in my bedroom before I went to bed. Everything was calm until my girlfriend came home. She was on vacation with her family. I welcomed her home, and she asked me with terror in her voice, "What is that?" She pointed behind my back, but there was nothing there. She had schizophrenia, but she always took her medication. Surely she hadn't forgotten it? Really? I wrote it off as a schizophrenic episode, told her to calm down and that there was nothing there, carried her into the bedroom, and went to bed. As it would later turn out, I should have paid attention. About 2 days later, the situation really picked up. I was at my dad's house, and he told me he saw something along the tree line on his farm. I noticed it too. It was the same thing I had seen before. Looked like a black bear. I got my rifle from the truck and aimed at it through the scope to see what it was. The reality was more horrible than I could have imagined. He had 6 legs, 2 of which were tucked up like a praying mantis. His body was covered in black plates, and compared to the tree, he was probably 10 feet tall. My expression fell, and now I was trembling with terror. "John?" I remained silent, lowered my rifle, turned to him and said, "I don't know what it is," and handed him the rifle. When he looked, he saw it too. His eyes were almost piercing, like cutting your soul in two. My girlfriend and my mother came out of the house. They were chatting about something. I can't remember. I was too shocked. In fact, my father to this day doesn't remember anything about that day, except that thing. It was like everything was erased from his memory that day. And that was fair enough. The way it looked was more grotesque than I can put into words. Later that night, my father had a heart attack. The fear from the day before had overwhelmed his heart, and it was still beating in anxiety, I suppose. That's why he had the heart attack. My mother was worried about him, and I didn't tell her what I thought caused it. I never told her that, and I never will. My father was discharged 2 weeks later. Since then, I have had encounters with the creature on my property. I even fired a few bullets at him. But contrary to expectations, it did nothing for him, so I started buying more and more powerful weapons. On the 9th night, my girlfriend, let's call her Sarah, woke up and screamed. And when I woke up, this creature jumped out of our bedroom window. I got up and pulled out the rifle I kept in our room, and took aim at it as it ran away. Then it went across the street into the cornfield. I couldn't see it to get a clear shot, so I took aim and fired once. Of course, that did nothing, and I started to get angry, thinking, why isn't my gun doing anything to this thing? How strong is it? I was horrified. For the first time, I felt real terror. I felt powerless. If that thing wanted to, it could kill me at any moment. So I prepared a trap. In the 3rd shed, I set up barbed wire at foot level, a puddle of gasoline far enough away that something could fall into it, some gunpowder that I lit and threw down that I hoped would kill the creature. Sarah's schizophrenic attacks became more frequent, and she increasingly forgot to take her medication. But I didn't know then that this thing was increasing our anxiety. One morning, Sarah snapped and even hurt herself, and I had to send her to the hospital to get stitches. And at that point, I was tired, and I was going to finish this creature off in any way I knew how. So I lured it out and put my plan into action, and it went off without a hitch, all the way to the end. It came out of the flaming ruin that was my 3rd barn. Now this creature became incredibly angry. It made some kind of sound that made me fall to my knees. I threw up. After I got up, I ran to my truck, got in it and started it up. It chased me as I pulled away and kept up until my truck hit 110 miles per hour. I was too busy looking in my rearview mirror to notice the approaching turn. I looked back and then swerved. At 112 miles per hour, I crashed my truck. It flipped over too many times for me to count. I unbuckled my seatbelt and fell on the roof. I crawled outside, slowly losing consciousness. The last thing I saw was the thing doing something like laughing, like mocking me. I fell unconscious and woke up later in the hospital. Looked around. In a daze, of course. The nurse said something. I couldn't make it out, but it was something along the lines of, "You had a pretty bad crash, but you're okay now." I was focused on whether Sarah was okay. I was obviously high on the anesthetic they were giving me, so I couldn't do much. The next day, I was discharged from the hospital. Sarah had already gone home, so I went there. When I arrived, Sarah was in the bathroom taking a shower. I made my way to the living room and lay down, exhausted more mentally than physically. When Sarah finished showering and put on new clothes, she told me to go up to our room. I did. And she pointed out that there was nothing watching us among the trees. I later nicknamed it the Stalker, because it was following us. I took my most powerful rifle and went outside, but by the time I reached her, she was gone. It repeated every day since then. Until last year, around the time of my birthday, when Sarah and I, newly married, moved from Montana to Kansas to be away from it. Just 2 weeks later, it showed up and started coming to us every 3 days. After studying it for 2 weeks, I realized that I was cursed. I began to use holy objects as weapons against him, although I had no faith at the time, so it was pretty useless against him. So I went to the priest and he told me, "Give this to God, and you will be delivered." So I did. The last time I saw him, he was totally enraged. He pounced on me, pinned me to the ground and fought me with his claws. I had to cover my head and vital organs. He stripped my right arm and broke my left forearm. I'm glad I taught Sarah how to shoot. She shot him in the back of the head, the place with the thinnest armor, knocking him down and putting him in a bit of a daze. I got up and Sarah helped me away. He lunged at me but hid in the darkness. To this day, I attribute what we did to the work of God, and I am now with the pride of a preacher, and to this day we have not seen him again. Next time you're in the forest, it's best to stay away from any strange structures there. Good night.